Hi there, welcome back to the show. So, balancing safety versus finance, what gives? The concept of working remotely at home is not new, especially since 9/11. I was in the midst of the crisis, to tell you the truth, so I remember clearly the terrors of the time, but the need for companies to continue producing and the workforce needed to be more nimble. So working from home was the answer. So we are talking about a concept that has been around for quite some time, but certainly not the entire country working from home. So there's a lot that we need to digest, and there's a lot we need to put into perspective in terms of how we manage our time and our energy in making sure that we are productive for our companies, and also that we're not overwhelmed with everything that's around us, because as you know, there's the refrigerator, the children, the dogs, the friends calling, which can be distracting. So how does that affect your productivity, and what do you need to do in order to ensure that you're producing what your company expects of you, while at the same time having some semblance of normalcy? Hello, I'm Michael Robinson, host of the Michael S. Robinson Show here on Microbin Radio. Welcome to our streaming of the series, Us Beyond COVID-19. We're live every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on Facebook at Michael Robinson NY, and here on YouTube at Michael S. Robinson Show. Please subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up if you like what we're talking about, and send me comments and certainly questions. I'm more than happy to answer. If not in real time, I promise I'll get to you when everything is behind me. My guest is Doug Claffey. He's the founder of Energage. Doug received his master's degree in systems engineering from the University of Pennsylvania and a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering from the University of Delaware. He started his career in aerospace engineering at GE and analytical graphics. He left rocket science to pursue his passion for making the world a better place. First at McKinsey and Company, and then starting his own company, a man of my own heart, called Energage. Welcome to the show, Doug.
Great to be here, Michael. Thanks very much.
No, thank you for being here. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have your company. So first of all, how are you?
I'm doing well. I was getting a little nervous there because somebody was actually out trimming my yard as we were coming up to the wait up here. So one of the hazards of working from home is unexpected noises from around the house. But other than that, I'm doing great.
Don't worry, I totally understand it. I have to deal with the same crisis usually, but have to try to play it cool, you know, so nobody knows that my feathers are ruffled. My dog is sitting at my feet, by the way, but it's fine. So tell us about your company, Energage. I love the name. Tell us about it.
Thanks so much. Energage is a combination of energize and engage, and it's about energizing and engaging employees at work. We really help to connect and listen to employees. We're a culture and engagement company. We've been around for just over 14 years now. And
congratulations.
Many of your thanks so much. Many of your listeners may know us from the Top Workplaces programs we run all around the country, in the New York area at Newsday, and then up in Connecticut with the Hearst papers, and up in Hartford with the Current.
Mm-hmm. So working from home, I'm sure that your employees are not at the office at the moment.
We're 100% work from home and have been since the governor shut down the state 8 weeks ago.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about best practices, because a lot of folks are dealing with the nuance of being at home. You know, it's very distracting, as I mentioned, having the dog barking, the kids wanting your attention, the fridge calling you for that, you know, cheesecake that might be sitting there. So it's really hard to really get down to focusing on getting the job done, but yet your company expects you to be productive. And a lot of companies don't have the same business model such as yours. How should one best manage one's time in order to be maximum productive for your company, while at the same time having some semblance of normalcy?
So it of course depends first on your job and your role in the company. If you're fortunate enough to work in a role where you can work from home, then you really have to establish what your boundary conditions are at home first. If you have children where you've got to attend to them at certain hours, then setting up your flexibility such that you can get your job done, but also look after your children's needs, that becomes very quickly job one for those with childcare needs. In terms of setting up the rest of your day for productivity, it's about your productivity, but it's also about your team. So if you're going to be collaborating with others, do you set up times where you might have blockout zones where you get back to work at home, or do you set up time to just go out and take a walk outside just to get a break from sitting in front of the Zoom screen?
Right. Right, exactly. One of the things that you mentioned was collaboration, which I know is crucial in running any company. Everyone has to be able to communicate with each other so the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. Working remotely, unfortunately, is one of those things where things fall through the cracks. I know that firsthand. Sometimes people don't want to engage their colleagues because they don't like the person. They probably don't want to bother the person. How do you best, right, deal with a situation whereby an employee is not really anxious to engage collaboration with other employees? How do you actually push that so that people are more open and communicative and the dialogue flows freely so that things are not clogged in the wheel?
So one of the most important things we have found is to ask your employees how communication and collaboration are going. Use a pulse survey to reach out and ask them about those topics of how well are you communicating within your team? Mm-hmm. How well are you communicating with other teams? And then how well are you working with your manager? And then you can find the hot spots in the organization so that you can go in and celebrate the departments or groups that are doing really well. But then maybe go in and help out if there are departments or groups that are struggling, as well as to provide, of course, best practices for everybody. But that asking employees how it's going is a critical step, and doing that in a safe way so that they can feel that they can share how things are going is critical as well.
So what about meetings? Because I know we dread meetings, certainly now that we're not going into the office anymore. Should companies have audio meetings, video meetings like you and I are having at the moment? What would be the best practice to ensure that everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, best practice from our experience and from our research is video meetings. We get an awful lot of communication through voice. You get additional information through body language and facial emotions. We can tell if you have the video turned off, it can be very tempting to go multitask. Maybe you check your Facebook, maybe you're checking your email, and not to be present. But you can tell right away if somebody's glancing down at their PDA or at their smartphone when they're on video, and so you can make sure that you're present.
Right. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the idea of getting back into the workforce, right? Because, I mean, it's great that we have the opportunity, those of us with a job, to work from home, but being able to assimilate back into the workspace is kind of a little bit disconcerting for many people. I mean, a lot of my friends are eager to go back to work, but they're afraid of the subways in New York or dealing with the ramifications of interacting with a person or a thing that might have the virus attached to it. How do we, as employers, guarantee our employees that the workplace is a safe place for them to come back to?
It's a great question. And I think you mentioned another aspect of particularly life in New York, but the concern around the commute as well. Mm-hmm. And so as an employer, what we are seeing as best practice is first off to, once again, check in with your employees on how they're feeling about the return to the office. And in every case that we've run this particular pulse survey, the senior leadership team have been surprised to find out just how diverse the emotions are around the return. Very often there is departments and groups that are really excited to get back and feel to be more productive.
Right.
And there are groups that are really dreading coming back and feeling that they'll become much less productive. So asking and listening and finding out ahead of time where that is really critical. From a demographic perspective, there's just a couple of critical demographics to think about. One is childcare, folks who have childcare challenges at home. Schools, for the most part, are not open. Daycares are not, for the most part, are not open. So being sensitive to those needs for families who've got kids at home is a critical step as you think about coming back to work. And then there are folks who are more susceptible to complications associated with COVID, or have people in their homes who are more susceptible, more higher risk for COVID. So being aware of that while maintaining their privacy is really critical. So understanding what percentage of your population are in those different categories. And then from a safety perspective, what we're seeing as a best practice is to phase in the return to work, to send in a small team initially. Typically it's your folks who maybe don't have to commute on the subway, maybe they can walk or ride or drive to work, and the ones who are eager to get back and maybe look for volunteers. Let them go the first step, and then after that you can start to phase in others, and you may have people that are still working from home. One tip that we've heard from a number of companies works really well is to consider having a thermal scan thermometer at the entrance to the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
Not only does that demonstrate very physically right when you walk in that you are checking for this and you care about it, but friends of mine who are CEOs have had folks with elevated temperatures, and in both cases they actually ended up testing positive for COVID.
Wow. No, I think that is a legitimate fear that most people have, right? All right, so the state is open. My company says it's okay for me to return to work, but I don't feel safe. How do we communicate that to our staff that it is relatively safe? Because you can't guarantee anything. Obviously, you can't see the virus. But how can we communicate that to the staff members that we're doing everything in our powers to make sure that while at work, they're safe? I mean, are we going to be putting up cubicles? Because a lot of workspaces have now been opened up, right, to allow better communication and more socialization, right? So now are we going to put back up cubicles, or are we going to be moving desks further apart, getting rid of some furniture, making the loft space less lofty? You know what I mean? There has to be some strategy that would give me or you the confidence to go back into the workforce and know that if Susan sneezes, I'm far enough away from her that I'm not going to be potentially catching her cold or whatever it is she has.
Yeah, in terms of the getting back to work, the communicate is really important. And what we're seeing in the best practices is people communicating to the point where employees are like, okay, I got it. And so
Yes.
that communication up front on the go back to work is start with a pulse survey around people's emotions around getting back to the workplace and productivity. Develop your plan to make sure you take into account the kinds of considerations you're going to have, whether it's subway travel or commute or childcare, et cetera. Get the plan out, communicate. Get some feedback on the plan. Is it clear? Do people have a level of confidence in it? And then as you phase your way in, keep that listening channel open so that you're making sure that employees feel heard. That if employees don't feel safe, ideally you don't want them in the office because they can cause a tremendous amount of trouble in the office if they're living in a state of fear. If they can do their job from home and do it just as well, consider giving them the option to work from home.
Sure.
If their job is one where they have to be in the office, and in many jobs and roles in manufacturing or where you actually have to be at the office, then at some point it's gonna come down to a decision. Do I elect not to come back to work, or do I take the risk? There's always a risk, small risk, hopefully as small as we can make it, of going back into the office. To your point around office configuration, what we're seeing is plexiglass dividers. You can get those for the open cubes, and so you put these plexiglass. It's like a sneeze shield for your salad bar, but it's for the workplace. And then and conference rooms now, fewer chairs, spread out. You're wearing masks, and so it is not the same as it was before. You're typically wearing a mask. You're in a conference room where you can't see people's faces. You and I can see each other's face right now. In some respects, we could see more, smiles or not, than you might even be able to in the office.
Right, exactly. Yeah, so that's a concern. And I think also it's important, as you mentioned, communication is key. So asking people how they feel, you get a sense as to who is ready to go back into work and who is not, the fears that people may have. And when you have a big company, it's really hard to do that. But certainly if line managers are given a certain protocol or instructions as to how to approach this, I think we stand a better chance of integrating people back into the workforce a lot more seamlessly than if we were to just say to people, hey, we're open for business, come to work. It's jarring.
You're exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and really the simplest, easiest, quickest way to do it is with a pulse survey. So run a pulse survey. Most people are going to have an email address or a phone, and so run a pulse survey out and make sure it's lightweight, quick, and something that people can feel safe to respond to. And you'll find out where people stand instead of guessing. Right.
Let's talk a little bit about productivity. I should have mentioned that before, but it slipped my mind. When you are working at home, oftentimes studies have shown, I know this going way back, that some people are more productive at home while others are not. How do we ensure that there's a benchmark for productivity on a consistent basis for everyone?
It's a great question. What we're seeing is that by and large, people are on average, more productive when they work at home, but collaboration and innovation is much more difficult. And so if I'm doing focus work, deep focus work, typically, depending on your home environment, depending on your dog and your kids, you might be able to get some time to actually do some deep focus work. But where you're working with designs or you're looking at doing some brainstorming, it's tougher from home. And so in terms of a standard productivity, I don't think there is one. If you're running best practices for goal setting, whether using OKRs or balanced scorecards or MBOs or SMART objectives, ideally you're able to use the same ones you used before you started working from home. And then you might find that you're more productive against that. If you're not, then you have to start looking at, are there tools that we can start to use from different practices, or should we be meeting in the office, with a small group, once a week or something?
Mm-hmm. No, I think it's also important to communicate that to each person, what is expected of them. And exactly. When you have a benchmark to work with, then there's no confusion, right? There's no misunderstanding or uncertainty in terms of what the employee is expected to produce and what the employer is expecting from him or her. It's really interesting. Communication is so key. I was listening to the British Prime Minister, was it last Sunday, talk about rolling out the plan for reopening the UK. And, it was interesting because on one hand, I thought it was very ambitious to come up with a plan, but there were confusing rhetoric in the plan. And, the reporters at the end were like, oh my God, he's confusing us. He's giving us, he's telling us to open up and then we can drive or bike to work. And then, so I think it's important to have the simpler the plan, the better. Would you agree?
Totally. And clarity is critical. Simplicity helps with clarity. And so if you can keep it clear, keep it simple, but make sure you've addressed the concerns and the fears that employees have, then you'll be in really good shape.
Very good. So where can we reach you?
Just want to put in a plug for Top Workplaces.
Yes.
Top Workplaces is the research program that we conduct. You can find out more about Top Workplaces at topworkplaces.com. And coincidentally, the last day for registration for our Long Island program with Newsday and our Connecticut program with the Hearst newspapers in Connecticut is tomorrow. So if you go to topworkplaces.com, you can get a free survey of your workplace. It'll tell you where you stand. You'll get the feedback that you're looking for. You can also find out more about return to work pulse surveys, which will help you get that information you need to get back in the office, but get that critical employee feedback to make those critical decisions.
And your website is?
So the Top Workplaces website is topworkplaces.com, and Energage, Energage.com.
Mr. Doug Claffey, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you for your wealth of information. It's been a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Michael. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thanks
Until
so much.
next time.
And as well.
I'm Michael Robinson. Remember, this is your time. Use it wisely.